What is up? What is up? What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Year of the Vet. If this is your first time listening, welcome. Thank you for pressing play, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to drop some knowledge. And this is a good conversation to actually get some knowledge, because I'm having a conversation with the CEO Adjutant of the California chapter of the Disabled American Veteran Organization. And the DAV has done so much for me. I mean, if you've listened to the show, you know that they surprised me by honoring me as their Outstanding Veteran of the Year last summer in 2017. They have helped me get my claims done, whether it's education, health, change of record, all that stuff. And with a smile on their face. It never feels like I'm walking into a organization that I'm a number. And every time I walk into an office, I feel welcomed and I'm appreciated as a veteran and a service member and a person. So the DAV has given me a lot, and that's why not to sound like a commercial, but that's why I gave back to the DAV and became a lifetime member, because it's the least I could do for what they've done for me. All right, enough of that, because we absolutely will get into a conversation about what the DAV does offer, and it's a lot. So I don't want to take up the whole intro telling you everything the DAV is going to do when you can just listen to it from the horse's mouth. Before we get into the conversation, I just want to remind you that I am on all social media platforms that I am aware of. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, LinkedIn. I am accessible. I answer emails and messages, and I mean, really, when I say it's the year of the vet, it's not just a saying. I really am looking to improve your life. I'm trying to improve my life, but I'm also looking to bring the rest of you with me. And that's the purpose of these podcasts, is to introduce you to individuals who have walked the path of transition already in front of you, so you can learn from them and you don't have to learn the lessons the hard way on your own. We've been there. And it all started with the book, How to Grow a Beard, a Military Transition Guide Back into Civilian Life. And that was my story. And so when I started hearing other people's stories, I knew it was my mission to get other people's stories out there for you to hear, so we can all learn together. And this conversation does that. I mean, at some point I tell Dan that I feel like this conversation is speaking to me directly, because that's what happens when you allow yourself to just open up and receive information. You're going to hear something that resonates deep, and it's the church mentality. Even if you don't go to church for 48 years and then you walk into church one day just for shits and giggles, it always seems like that message is speaking directly to you. So, all right, enough of that. So the conversation that Dan and I have continues conversations that Dan and I typically have, and that is how to get more people involved with the DAV. But before that, Dan lays out what it means to be a veteran. Somebody who is looking to help other veterans. Somebody who's looking to improve their community, because our service doesn't just stop after we take off our uniform. In order to support each other, we have to support each other. And that means that you get involved with volunteering if you can. That means that you show up to meetings and support legislative actions if you can. That means that you just simply spread the word if you can. However you can help another veteran, whether it's a neighbor, whether it's somebody with a service sticker on the back of their car and they're broke down on the side of the highway, it's on us to help each other. And you're going to get a lot of that from this conversation, because Dan supports legacy. And the legacy that Dan supports is the legacy that we take care of each other. Because if we don't take care of each other as veterans, then who will take care of us? You have to understand that after World War II, veterans came home heroes. After Vietnam, veterans came back the villains. Now we are heroes again, but that can change, and it might change, and historically, it will change. And the only people that we can count on to take care of us is the people who care for us most, and that's us. Anyway, off of that soapbox, if you really pay attention to this conversation, you're going to pull something. Dan brings his recipe for success Dan brings up the mindset of keeping your mind open to opportunities. And he talks about mentors and how relationships that you establish today can totally change your life down the road. He talks about vision and legacy, consistency. I mean, there's so much in this conversation that I just urge you to let it play. So with that being said, I'm honored to introduce the CEO Adjutant of the California DAV, Mr. Dan Contreras.
Robert, how are you, brother?
Great. How are you?
I'm well. Just sitting here at a restaurant parking lot, gonna do an interview with you.
I'm glad that this is finally happening.
Yeah, no worries. I hope that it can be enriching for you. And I when I looked at it, I really thought it was going to be something that was going to be more of a kind of a current issue thing, but it's more of a thing about me. So that's
Absolutely.
cool.
Yeah, this glorifying, the veterans who've paved the way. And so this is all about you and your journey to where you're at today and the lessons learned. And I mean, but that deals with a lot of the current issues that we go through today anyway, because I mean, better than I do, our service members get out and they just are stuck. But, people are listening to podcasts and they're looking at these extra avenues of help. And I can't even tell you how many people just have reached out to me so randomly. Like, I want to give away puppies. A guy reached out to me 2 weeks ago with some guilt about the Vietnam veterans. And he was just like, how do I give back to these? And I tell you, I don't know how people are finding me, but it's out there, and that's the beauty of it. So, and you will forever be a part of this.
Well, great. I mean, there's no denying why things happen in such a unique way that you and I met, and it was so appropriate that we recognized you as our Veteran of the Year, because I mean, in struggling this year for that person who could meet that that criteria, we have to look at who have been our previous Veterans of the Year, and you kind of set the bar kind of high, so it's and so the fact that you continue in this in this mode, because I mean, you could literally be the Veteran of the Year every year, so that's pretty cool.
I appreciate that. Sincerely, I appreciate that. So thank you so much for that. So, but let's get started and turn it around on you.
Sure, let's do it.
Yeah.
That's my art form, is to also really make it about other people, not so much me.
You know what? I was thinking about that last night. I was thinking, like, what makes Dan, like Dan the man? And when I saw you blending your persona and your leadership role with the DAV at the conference, I saw exactly why you are special to the DAV, because I mean, you make people feel special, and that gets them to work harder. And so, like, yeah, that's a talent, and it's it's an art form, really. So yeah, you're good at it.
Well, thank you. Thank you, sir.
So we'll just jump right into it and talk about who pre-military Dan was.
Yeah, and looking at that, I think you have to look at just my culture. My culture is Mexican American, and both my parents were born in the United States, but they really epitomized the family dynamics, and not only just your closest siblings, but the entire cousins and aunts and uncles. I mean, we're going to have a big reunion for our family coming up in a couple weeks, and the overwhelming response to it is indicative of the culture that I was brought up in. Every weekend, my dad and I would jump in the truck. I'm the youngest of 6.
Oh my God.
We have 4 boys and 2 girls. And, I jump in the truck with my dad, and I go from my uncle's houses to my grandfather's house. And, just I grew up around that culture, and my mother, has always been so influential in my life. And I think a really key indicator to that was she passed away a couple of years ago, and I got a phone call, and I was born and raised in Fresno, and most of my family, immediate family, is still in that area. But I got a phone call that my mom had passed, and she struggled with some severe illnesses, so we saw it coming. And in the planning mechanism of it, just that afternoon, the family got together and we're at a restaurant, and I just was enriched by the conversation because everyone was arguing why they were her favorite or saying that they were her favorite. And to tell you the truth, I knew I was her favorite. So, I mean, but my mom, she said, she was a dropout before she dropped in. She had such a worldly smarts, and she was someone who could communicate with anybody, but yet she kept her circle very closed. And I think I'm the same way in that respect. I can gauge people pretty quickly, and my mom, she had that way about her, but she was very giving and very intuitive to people's needs, especially in conversation. And I just enjoyed that. And she had this intense sense of humor that could really shock some people sometimes, but yet it made her fun. And the dynamics around our family was always that the home, my mom's house, was the rock. I traveled all over the country plus overseas with the military, and would have given my mom a plane ticket anywhere I was ever going to go, but everything was always home. And so losing that dynamic, but the thing is that our core is still there. I have, like I told you, 3 brothers, 2 sisters, and my 3 brothers all served in the military. And that's where I saw what happened with them is they immediately left the house 18 years old. They were off and running, some even earlier than that. But my brother David served in the Navy. My brother Andy served in the Air Force. My brother Reuben was Air National Guard, and eventually he was with the Army National Guard. But it wasn't a matter of whether I'd go in the service or not. It was a matter of which branch. And at the time, my brother David was in the Navy during the Vietnam era in the 70s, and he was going around the world on Westpac tours, months and months at a time. And so he would send us pictures from exotic places, and you name it. I mean, they were, as far as the ports that he went to, just really gave anybody who was a world traveler or wanted to be, just a great experience. And so I thought, okay,
that's it.
He sounds like the one who's having the most fun. So let me go in the Navy. But I took the Navy ASVAB test. I went ahead and picked a job, and I went down to Oakland. But at the time, I was falling in love with my high school sweetheart. And I was at the indoctrination where I'm supposed to raise my hand and say yes, and I just didn't do it. I went up to my recruiter and I said, hey, you know what? Second thought, I'm not going to do this, and they were reluctant to put me back on a bus to go back to, my hometown. But a few months later, I talked to an Army recruiter, and I just saw that was a better opportunity because, the Navy is, it has its adventure and everything, but the brother I'm talking about, at that time, he had already been divorced twice, and subsequent to that, he's been married 5 times. And so, I didn't see it as a really good start to a relationship. And so I was stationed at Fort Lewis, and at Fort Lewis, I was able to really develop my goals I wasn't a conscientious objector, but I wanted to be a corpsman with the Navy. And so ended up, doing that. And it was really nice because Fort Lewis was really close in proximity to California, give or take. And it was close in proximity to my wife's family. And they lived in Wairika, which is that last town you get to outside of Oregon. But, so my brothers gave me a lot of good advice. and one of the advices that they gave me going into the military was play the game.
What does that mean?
I play the game means that, and I tell you what, it's almost something that is reflective of anybody's success if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And playing the game means that you're following the rules, that you are complying with the structure.
Yeah.
And they knew that the military had structure. They knew that the military had a recipe to success. That if you followed the rules, if you learned the game, if you were proficient at the game, you were going to be successful.
Yeah.
But if you didn't play the game, then you would be flying above the radar, and you would be, I would say someone who would be an outcast, because the conformist is the one who succeeds. I would say that when you look at the military, if you follow your leader, then you're going to be successful. If you look at what is it, that's ahead of you, and you challenge yourself to go inside of that. And I'll give you an example. So I went from working in a combat unit, and I was working in a clinic, and across the parade field, there was a bunch of people walking in uniforms. They were in white uniforms and going into this building every day. And I was like, what are they doing?
Mm-hmm.
And come to find out, they were going to nursing school, and I'm like, wow, so they go to nursing school? That's their job? They just do that every day? Well, how do I do that?
Yeah.
And so the thing about the military or anything is that, the opportunities are there. You just have to look at, what it is that a possibility.
1,000%.
I mean, in organization and in civilian worlds and in every capacity, there are opportunities there that people just are reluctant to take, or, they have this kind of mentality that, well, you know what, I'm not getting paid to do that, so why should I pursue it? And some of those are some of the things that I can take away from just that pre-military Dan is that I had the guidance from my brothers, because even at age 15, I moved in with my oldest brother because my parents were going through a divorce, and my brother probably disciplined me more. He taught me the party hard, work hard, mentality of things, and opportunities, presented themselves in that fashion.
Yeah.
And so, those dynamics that I saw with them, and all of them, are successful. All of them are part of our organization, the Disabled American Veterans. And, they have their own ancillary activities that are important to them. And I've seen where that service-minded mentality that we get from the military is something that resonates, and it continues,
Yeah. How old was your oldest brother when you moved in with him?
He was, so he was in his probably mid to late 20s.
Okay. So he had already been in uniform at that point.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And he was the one who was in the Guard.
Okay.
So he was doing weekend warrior work, and he was working with the National Forest Service.
Okay.
And he was living in a trailer on 50 acres with a swimming pond. It's a little town outside of Fresno, Auberry, where I couldn't make the tennis team at Bullard in Fresno, but at, Sierra Joint Union High School, and I was like, number one doubles player and number one singles player, But, in saying that with that influence that I had from my brothers, they really kept me in check, because I think they went through some very experimental things in their lives.
Yeah.
And they allowed, to a certain extent, me to also experiment those things, but they were there to help control it.
Gotcha.
And so that I think siblings can do that. I think that a lot of their, my oldest brother is someone who's kind of the executor of everything in our family. He's the one who is the central rock, now that my mom's gone.
Yeah.
But, he's just really been successful, 36 years with the Forest Service and 26 years with the National Guard, and just a loving father and husband, and
a
really
phenomenal role model.
Anybody needs anything within our family, he's there for them.
Yeah.
But and I think that in the military, having their insight was very important. But again, you grow in that insight yourself. And I'll give you an example. Is that talk about when opportunity knocks. And I remember when I was coming out of Germany, I had reached 3 years, and it was like, well, where am I going? And so I called U.S. Army personnel, and they said, well, we don't have you going anywhere yet, so where would you like to go? And so California, we wanted to come back. And so they said, well, good chance we can send you a letterman. And so when they came back on the phone, they told me they were sending me to San Antonio, Texas, to be an instructor at the Academy of Health Sciences. I was like, well, that's good. That's a feather in my cap. But my wife was like, what happened to California? Like the thing though there was, like I said, I continued to see where the evolution of knowing what it is our job is and being able to teach it and being able to be proficient at it. Mm-hmm. The military is very objective as far as its structure. It's what makes people successful is to be able to follow those objectives, to understand the objectives. And so I saw where, promotions were coming, but, I saw where people missed opportunities to be viewed as a potential for it. And some of the things that I can take away from this is that, I've always had this kind of mantra. When I look at people now, because, running the organization for California, I have to look at potential employees or, look at potential leaders. Who are we going to groom? Who is someone who's going to be a spokesperson for our organization, mm-hmm. especially in the fraternal line? One of the things I've always looked at is, what have you done? What are you presently doing? Yeah. And what do you have the potential to do? Yeah. And in the military, that was so key, because when they were looking for someone to be promoted to that next rank, what had you done? What are you doing? So if you were someone who said, well, that's an E7's job, I'm not going to do it. Yeah. That's their job. I'm not paid for it. But if you were someone who said, hey, if I can help, if I can learn what it is that I need to do at that next level, and you took on that responsibility, then your resume was filled with basically the experience. So in looking at that analogy of what have you done, then you've done that leadership role. What's your potential? Your potential is that you're going to be good at it because you already experienced it, and you're going to be able to teach others how to do it. And that's it. And the other thing that I came away from the military as well is that my job was to make my superiors look good. And I'm not saying, saying that it was, a brown nosing type of thing, but it was to follow their vision in supporting and carrying out everything that you possibly can do to help them accomplish that vision. And sometimes you're reluctant because you think it could be done a better way, and hopefully they were open to those things. But, we talk about what, we can reflect on what it is that I do now, and what I profess as I was growing through the organizational aspect of DAV. But, DAV came along because of my military. Everyone has that moment where they decide, okay, am I going to finish my career? Well, I had my aha moment way earlier than my departure, because I reached almost 17 years of service and had to make a decision to get out, because all of a sudden, I was diagnosed with something that they couldn't really figure out. Gotcha. All kinds of different tests were completed. And so they had to put me on the temporary disability retirement list.
Yeah.
And so with an evaluation of continuing with that, well, I told you I had a nursing background, so I was working for a home health company, and my operations sergeant at the academy, he was almost like that radar guy who could just get anything. So he was always someone who has been very influential in my career. I met him going through what's called a faculty development course. He was a special forces medic, a third-degree black belt, just had a great sense of humor. He was also a nurse. And so along the way, he was teaching another element at the academy, but then he ended up being able to come over to our office. We ran the education department for the combat medic division. And so we grew very close in that process. Well, take it a few years ahead, I'm now working as a marketing director for a home health company, and it was feast or famine.
Yeah.
And he calls me up and he says to me, he said, "You know what? I work for the Disabled American Veterans now as a national service officer." I'm like, "Well, what's that?" I didn't know. And he says, he goes, "You know how we talked about looking at how military members, when they get out of the military and they sustain disabilities, injuries, and what happens to them after that?
Yeah.
How are they, is it like a workman's comp thing?" And he goes, "I've learned what happens, and they need our help, and they need, someone like you." And so he said, "I think you should really consider this." And so here I am. I'm in San Antonio, Texas. I have a home, I have family, and he's, offering this, and I'm like, "Whoa, how much does it pay?"
Of course. Yeah.
And he says, "Well, some things can't be about pay, Dan." And I'm like, "So, well, let me think about it."
Yeah.
And I was getting disillusioned by the civilian world because remember I talked about how structure makes you able to have that recipe to success.
Yeah.
Well, I found that the civilian world, especially in healthcare, they have policies, manuals, as far as, very strict adherence to different levels of care. And they also have algorithms, things that you have to do in the event something else happens.
Mm-hmm.
And there was just kind of a passé approach to allowing certain people to disregard that, and it just blew my mind.
So let me ask this, because
sure.
I went through something similar, and I think that we're going to share this kind of this moment where
Mm-hmm.
I went straight from the Marine Corps. Well, not straight. It took me a few months to get there, but I went from the Marine Corps into a contracting job building radars. And so I was a wrench turner, but I knew I had more potential. And long story short, I was being groomed for management under one of my first program managers there. And so we were at dinner while we were in Canada once, and he was telling me how we charged the customer for certain things. Like, long story short, we would charge the customers $88 for a hammer. And so he was telling me how we justify that price, right? And the longer I was in this company and the longer that, because I would be the face of the company. When I was out of the country, in Canada, in Korea, wherever I was the face of the company. And I was establishing the rapport, and I was with these guys day in and day out, sweating and getting dirty and cut up and bleeding over the system. Like, I was there with them. And then I would have to come home, talk to the company, and hear what they wanted me to tell the customer about, a broken piece. "Oh, tell them it's XYZ. And I'd say, "Well, that's not true." Long story short, fast forward some time, I would start to look at myself in the mirror, and I could see in my face that this is not where I wanted to be, nor is it, was it doing me a service to myself being in this organization. And I'm kind of hearing that from you as well. Is that how it was?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's where you have to have a little bit of a moral high ground, especially when you're looking at the safety of the patients that you're supposed to be protecting.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm selling this family on our care management service, then, you know, we're just waiting for an accident to happen if you don't really enforce compliance, you know. And the biggest thing, and I think we can see it in society today, is that there isn't a consistency. And this is what I would say is something that I pride myself on, is that whenever something happens within our organization or within even my interpersonal relationships outside of work, I'm consistent, you know, and I think that they can fall back on whether or not to believe basically the opposite of that, because I've demonstrated consistency.
Yeah.
So when you look at what makes any company successful or any relationship successful, is that they're consistent. But in the same respect, in dealing with a lot of vendors or dealing with contracts, the basis of consistency means that if I am a person who's obligated to a certain standard or to some contractual language, or, you know, what the common norms are, then that's my obligation.
Gotcha.
But I also hold that same with the individual.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that I'm not going to ask them for above and beyond what they have indicated they're going to do. My expectations are not greater than what is on the policy or what is on the contract or what is expected from a friend or, you know, or a relationship. And I think that that's where people can be happy with that. And I tell as far as the individuals who are or have operational responsibility in my absence, their greatest success is to run it like I would, not to change things, not to, you know, modify things or enrich someone else by, you know, giving an employee the time off because you're now in that power position to do that.
Yeah.
So I think consistency is something that is, again, comes from the structure of being able to, that people could read you better that way.
Yeah.
Relationships and business can read you better that way.
Yeah.
And I constantly see that in the things that I do within this organization, you know, within the obligations that I have within the DAV. But, you know, so that would be certainly, again, another, you know, element of the recipe to success, you know, because then it's almost like you're subject to only what you have obligated yourself to.
Yeah.
And so there is something to be said about not putting too much on your plate, you know, and I think that's what people have to do, is kind of gear themselves to giving a lot of thought before obligating themselves to something, you know, and taking that pause is not going to be viewed as negative. It's going to be viewed as, well, you know, at least this person's thinking about it, you know, and so then you can evaluate, because, you know, more than, you know, a lot of other people, time is such an important element. It's the only really true, and I can't take full credit for this, but it's the only true commodity that we have is time, you know, and so you can venture to make a ton of money, but it's going to take away time from you, you know, and so is time more important with your family, with your kids, than bringing in more materialistic things and big dollars? And so, you know, when the person asked me about that, I was making a heck of a lot more money that I ended up starting with DAV.
Yeah.
But he made such good sense about the principle of what that adventure could be, you know. And so I would say that, you know, for me, that was something that certainly was was a lesson that kind of came just out of just making that type of, end of the world, walk off of it decision.
A lot of that
keep chasing the dollar, or do I chase something that's going to make me fulfilled? You know,
a lot of that hits home to where I'm at right now in my life, because, you said one of the most important things to learn is to not put too much on your plate. And I am the king of putting too much on my plate. One of the lessons I've had to teach myself this year that I'm constantly working on is saying no. And, not like, no, I'm not going to help you kind of way, but no, I'm sorry, because if I pick this up for you, I'm not going to be able to give you all of me, there's a lot. Yeah. There's a lot underlying that statement that you made, and a lot to me too. I mean, like I said, I graduate in 10 days and going to West Point for an internship. It's an unpaid internship. There's no room and board. Arlene does not like the fact that, I still haven't found a place to stay. And I'm like, hey, like if I have to stay in the truck for the first 2-3 weeks until I figure it out, I will. But the fact that it's, people have been on me, oh, it's an unpaid internship. I said, it's an opportunity. It's not about the money right now. This is all temporary, and I'm looking further into the future. But at the same time, I'm thinking when I do come home in August, I would have to, put some bread on the table. But I mean, in due time. And one of the things, you didn't say it in these words, but it connects to something that we talk about in sports psychology often, and that's, if you trust the process, the outcome will come. Trust the process, the outcome will be there. So like a lot of that resonates, a lot of what you said resonates really deep into me personally right now. So thank you for that, because I'm sure you didn't even realize that you were speaking directly to me. So,
well, and I see that with you, and especially with the family dynamics, is something that you certainly have to consider. And I know that I have a very supportive spouse, but my son is also near and dear to me, and I don't want to miss out on spending time with two of my granddaughters, and I have another grandchild on the way too. And so
congrats.
Those are moments that, I just resolved myself that, it's quality versus quantity kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that's also something that you have to look at too, because you don't want to miss an opportunity, and you do take that leap of faith that this is something that will enrich you to be able to maybe grow in a way that wouldn't be possible without this type of experience. And, we're talking about quotes, and I've written different articles, and I'll have to be honest, I glean quotes from different sources and not directly from the author themselves. But like, there's a wonderful movie called The Bridge to Terabithia, and it's a scholastic best-selling book of all times. But it quotes a Theodore Roosevelt quote, and it's basically the greatest prize in life is working hard at work worth doing. And so you've got to work hard. And I feel like I've been on the golden road in my life, that opportunities have come and I've not had to work that hard for them. But, others who are looking outside and seeing what I do can argue that I do work hard, but I think, again, that transition from the mentality of, basically, I was still in a service world, making sure that elderly patients were taken care of, they could have their quality of life in their home versus going into a retirement facility. And in a lot of ways, that comes from my culture. We don't put anybody in a retirement home. It's just something that it's ingrained in a lot of different cultures. When I was stationed in Germany, I saw that as well. The Germans have that kind of familial culture where, the Oma and Opa are in the home with the family and until they die,
Yeah.
and so, but I would say that again, when you do something that is not just for a paycheck, I mean, the paycheck is part of it. We have to have a certain lifestyle. We have to have, our staples, and we have to have a roof over our head and all those things. So you have to do that.
Yeah.
But, I have a son who graduated from UC Santa Barbara, business econ, and he's had like 5 jobs since college.
Yeah.
Just can't find his happy ground. And I told him that it's something that you have to look at, that what you're doing now for a paycheck enables you to do those things that you want to do, that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
And that the best thing that you can do is certainly find a career path that is in the field of what you're passionate about. But if it doesn't happen, it's not, uncommon. And you just have to think about how you can accomplish those things. And so many different people do different things that are, hobby oriented or that fulfills them, or volunteering or doing different things but they have to do something else in order to accomplish being able to have the time and the treasure, to be able to do that. And their talents are part of it. And so, that's something that I think that we have to look at, especially in our organization, is how do we motivate people to be a part of this organization that's been around since 1920, since 1921 here in California. It's no different than any other service organizations or fraternal organizations in general. They are losing their zeal. They're losing the catalyst to what it is their main purpose. And our main purpose, of course, is to help veterans.
Yeah.
I mean, it was established because there was no VA, because there was no entity that was looking out for our veterans. And somebody's vision, idea that they were able to use what I call persuasion, versus dictating to someone why they have to do something. Because the people who are really good at the X and O's and the nuts and bolts of structure have a tough time if they don't understand, especially in our world, that we're dealing with volunteers. And volunteers need to be motivated. They need to be influenced. But you have to have a persuasive way about bringing them in, and a way that you use their strengths.
Yes.
You help them to feel like they're contributing their talent or time or treasure, if that's what it is that they want to do, to a worthy cause. Like you were alluding to earlier, individuals or organizations or companies are coming to you as a conduit to help certain elements of the things that are important to them. And with our organization, that's something that I am so proud of our organization, because we are in the Better Business Wise Given Alliance. We are an organization that is so transparent. You saw our finance meetings. You saw, our distribution of our annual budget in a black and white, line item by line item. And I am so proud of that transparency. But the thing is that our organization has really developed itself with that type of reputation because we follow the intent of the donor. The intent of the donor is not to enrich the individuals who are within our organization. Yeah. The intent of the donor is not for us to use our funds outside of veteran entities. Not that that's not important, not that, other types of elements that are needed in society that follow that kind of a nonprofit way of their, strategic plan or their articles of incorporation or whatever it is that they use to establish what it is they do. But for us, this is what we do. This is what we do best. and this is what our donors expect.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's so important, that we can look at that, and that the people who become part of our organization can understand that whatever it is, that how they can enrich this. I mean, we had an initiative called a volunteer recruitment rally. So we had certain elements. We have volunteers that are traditional hospital volunteers. We have volunteer drivers. We have what's called the Jesse Brown Scholarship Program, which is for youth volunteers. We have what's called the Local Veterans Assistance Program. It's individuals who are doing things for veterans or for the cause of the DAV that are not in that traditional sense. But if you think about it, you're going to use different individuals. Who has influence with the media? Who has influence with high schools, to promote the Jesse Brown Scholarship Program? Who is someone who has idle time that they can, drive around and just meet people, or who has some specific talent that they can use in a clerical way and work at the VA hospital, or, just use a different element? Or, have you already been doing it? Have you been helping veterans, a neighbor or someone like that? And so our goal was to identify and to enrich and grow our volunteer network. Well, we did so well. Our goal was to beat West Virginia, and believe it or not, this was just significant in the local veterans assistance program. So we looked at what did we need to do in order to really showcase what was already happening in California. I mean, California has nearly, 1.9 million veterans, and we have such a vast population that there is a lot of work that's being done in regards to veterans, but we weren't capturing it. We weren't using some type of data collection in order to accomplish it.
Yeah.
Well, in the 2 years that we've had just a focus on this program, not only have we blown West Virginia out of the water, but we've just really exponentially have showcased what California is doing in respect to the volunteer aspect of what's happening. And so people get excited about that.
Yeah.
I think that what makes a person feel like they're a part of something is when they are able to contribute. So the mundane meetings that happen at a lot of fraternal things because of the structure it's part of it, but it can't be all of it, because then it really will, I would say, just not influence anybody to be a part of that, because who wants to bicker over, $25 on a budget, kind of thing. But, so the most successful chapters that we have are ones that are integrating, like we have a veterans exploration garden where they've built this vegetable garden where veterans can come and work the garden and see the fruits of the labor literally, or a resource lab, or work at an equestrian center, or the community. We have one of the chapters that you're familiar with. They work with the Operation Gratitude, where they are supporting our troops overseas with different programs.
Yeah.
So I think that that's the takeaway that needs to happen in regards to this, next generation of veterans.
So that's what I wanted to get into, because when you and I met, one of the very first questions that you asked me, and it was like a question and a challenge at the same time, which I embraced. And you said, how about we meet up soon and you let me know how to bridge the gap? And I mean, it wasn't too much more than that, but essentially that was, how do we bridge the gap between your generation and mine? And it's a phenomenal question, because between our generations, there wasn't much going on. There was, we had Vietnam, then we had Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and then a lot of nothing, right? And what I am picking up from the individuals I meet at the SVOs are, in that downtime, there weren't a lot of guys coming in saying, hey, I want to be a part of something. That was kind of a downtime for you guys, as in for us, as in for, you know, America.
Right.
And so bridging the gap was a very interesting thought, and it got me thinking. To this day, I think about it, like, you know, how do we connect the two? And you guys have done a phenomenal job. Nobody listening can actually get the visual of what you're doing. And I encourage you, if you're listening right now, absolutely shoot on over to the DAV website, and you'll see that you don't have to have lost your legs. This is for individuals who simply have served in a deployed environment, correct?
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's also not generational either. I would say that there are many opportunities, both on the morale welfare side of things, as well as the advocacy. There's a lot of other things, especially like here in California. We have a fishing derby that we do 2 times a year. As a matter of fact, one of the derbies, it's a salmon derby. It's this Saturday, and it's going to be up in Monterey, and that is free of charge to a disabled veteran. And you can go to Monterey Bay Veterans Inc.org online, or mbvinc.org online, and you can see the great work that they do. And they have a second derby in September. You know, so like Robert was saying, if you go to our website, you can see just the various different activities that are potentially there, events that are happening, legislative work that's happening. And that's the big way that individuals can get involved. We have the Commanders Action Network that can be something that can just be an email that you'll receive, and you can hear about the latest information that's going on. Because, I mean, there's a lot of threat to the veterans world in regards to privatization of healthcare, in regards to, you know, limiting benefits because someone has individual unemployability, and, you know, they cannot potentially collect Social Security individual unemployability at the same time. But we pride ourselves in the ability for us to represent veterans with their claims. And it comes from a lot of training that happens within our organization. Not to say that other organizations don't do their fair share of training and are versed at what they do, but we invest a lot in our training. As a matter of fact, I sit on the National Service Foundation, and we've invested $1.5 million on automation of our training program, which is a continuing education training program for we call it iTrack system, and it has 3D imaging for the entire musculoskeletal and basically the systems. And you can associate that to any disability, and it will also present the regulation, the statute that comes from the United States Code with it.
Wow.
It has the ability for the NSOs which is the National Service Officers, to blog with each other. So then if there is some common practices that are, you know, happening or some kind of precedence case that has been presented, but it is just a state-of-the-art type of tool for our service officers. And, you know, we not only represent veterans in their initial claims, we represent them in the claim for increase, we represent them in their claims for appeals, we represent them in their search for ancillary benefits, not only for themselves, but for their dependents, in death and indemnity claims as well, and burial claims. But the thing that our organization also does is, and I'm so proud because we've only had our job element of our organization probably for only 3 years, but we have a database that is enormous. I think it's over 700,000 jobs, and we work with Recruit Military and do these job fairs. But I know that individuals get tired of job fairs, but we do them virtual as well. So we've discovered that, you know, you have an individual sitting at a table at a job fair, you know, they can interview 50 people in a day. But when you can have 8,000 people visiting that job fair at the same time on a virtual job fair, and the employers are ones that are hiring on the spot in a lot of cases. And so I'm really proud of our organization because we had a really well encompassed way of supporting our veterans in regards to any questions they have regarding VA, but to come full circle to even incorporate the job element of it, because there's still the consideration to vocational rehabilitation, and I'm sure a lot of post 9/11 generation is looking at the GI Bill and really that was even extended, and maybe a lot of people don't even know that. And there's so many different benefits that are there for Californians. California is very good to its veterans. Tuition-free assistance for your dependents, and if you have a service-connected disability, loan guarantee, a bunch of different benefits, parks and rec benefits, and licensing benefits, because if you have a vet card, then a lot of times that'll get you discounts, and a lot of times it might get you out of a ticket if you present your vet card to the police officer. But and this goes back to, I want to just kind of digress back to our initial conversation and how I wanted to connect the generations, because, ideally it's all about who's going to be the ones to carry the legacy. Right now, our organization, as well as I think the state population, is predominantly Vietnam era. Yeah. And they're in their full-on retirement age now, late 60s, early 70s. And so it's going to be just something that has to click. Yeah. Because otherwise, my upcoming presentation at our state convention, which is happening in Anaheim and the first week in June, is I'm doing a membership summit, because we are experiencing, even in our organization, even in California, a membership crisis. In the last 10 years, we have lost over 40,000 members to our organization. And if we look at the next 10 years, if that continues, California, the DAV, which we're the largest fraternal department in the nation, we're the Division I leaders for our organization for 20 plus years. But how do we tap into, what's $10 a month? Yeah. And you can be a full life member. And if you're just a 20 years old or something like that, it's like $150 or something like that. But the point I'm trying to make is to have some kind of involvement is so important, to take ownership. That it is your responsibility to look out for your fellow veteran. Yeah. And that's why I'm asking you, because it blows my mind, because I know that right now we have a lot of individuals from the post 9/11 who are raising families, have jobs, don't really have a lot of time. But our meetings are typically once a month for an hour and a half or so. And there's a lot of camaraderie, a lot of good exchange, a lot of good information. Yeah. And come on. The biggest thing, and The Power of Habit is one of the great books I read. And it talks about where you have to have some type of marker that indicates the importance of you following through in doing something, So put it on your calendar once a month, to attend a meeting, to be a part of an organization, to be versed in it, if anything, just so you can be a spokesperson who can help others. Because I can't tell you, there's so many social situations where it turns into, I find out someone has a veteran in their family who they believe is in need of help or services. And what you do is you just bring them back to us. We have our kind of our grassroots efforts and how we accomplish things. And you could be trained in that. We'll train you to be a chapter service officer, to not only help yourself, but to help others. And so, that's the legacy building thing is such an important part of what makes the military successful.
Yeah. So I've got a question.
Sure.
One of the big things is, like you said, there's this drive to get people to take ownership in their veteran status, right? Their veteran status, give back to their veterans. When I was when I was in Reno with you guys, somebody had said, if we don't take care of ourselves, who will? And that resonated deep in my chest. If we as veterans don't take care of our veterans, then we can't expect somebody else to do that. But, and there's no but. There's absolutely no but. It's more of a dot. So that leads into the question, which kind of goes back into earlier part of the conversation, which is you've been very successful getting people to see your vision, and that kind of creates success. Right now, how do we as veterans that should be pulling in other veterans, right? How do we use the tools that you would use to get people to see our vision, to get people to see your vision, right? You have a very clear vision about where you want the DAV to be in the next 10, 20, 30 years. Even if you pass away, you have a very clear vision of what you see for the DAV's future. How do we express your vision and make it our own?
But I think first and foremost is that you have to understand what it is that our organization does. And a lot of, I consider us here, especially in California, the silent giants. We have such an impact that is both on a state level. I mean, we have legislative work that's being done at the state level, on the national level. We have, I think what really would be the key to someone understanding more about what it is that our organization does is going to be the start of it. And sometimes, just an introduction to our organization is quite often beneficial to the individual, because they didn't realize that, they could still file a claim even though they're a Korean War veteran or they're a World War II veteran if they're still around. They didn't know that. They could have filed a claim even though they hurt themselves when they were home on leave, because they thought maybe I wasn't, in the military and I was just playing softball with the family and I hurt myself and I didn't know, So I think that they need to learn about their own self first. We could do just a cursory discussion with someone, and we're everywhere. We're at the outpatient clinics, we're at the VA central offices, we're at chapters with our chapter service officers. So if they went on to davcal.org, they could see where the service officers are and just have a frank discussion with one of our service officers. Not the fact that we want them to file fraudulent claims or frivolous claims. We want them to just have an understanding, because that's our nuts and bolts of our organization, is our claims work, our service work. And we don't paint pretty rainbows in the sky. We want you to have the maximum benefits allowed by law, nothing more, but nothing less. And that's important to us. And here's a really interesting statistic, is that in California, we have, again, like nearly 1.8, 1.9 million veterans, and only 35% of those veterans are receiving benefits, is the latest statistic. And that means that there's a lot of veterans who don't even know about their benefits. And so that is so key, that I think that's kind of an intro into the organization. And in a lot of ways, that's how an individual finds themselves either at one of our information seminars, which we do quite often. We have mobile service operations that if you live within a 50-mile radius of one of the locations that we're going to do our information seminars, and you could go online to the DAV.org site to see where we're doing an information seminar or a mobile service operation. and there's a lot of volunteers there who are from our chapters. But we do like volunteer work, like at Golden Corral. We do a military appreciation Monday. We have different things that people can get involved in or just come and enjoy, the Memorial Day festivities or the Veterans Day festivities or events. And you can go on our site to see where that is and bring the family. We have a family element of our organization. It's our auxiliary, and it's open to males and females. As time has evolved, we have a lot of female service members. As a matter of fact, that's the fastest growing demographic in the United States is female veterans. And so we have very key programs that are related to female veterans. But, who knows? The spouse might be a male, might be a female. So we want to incorporate the family into the dynamics of understanding how, as a team, they can work together to help awareness with veterans. We do things with Golden Corral called Camp Corral. We sponsor sending disabled veterans' children to a 1-week camp, very enriching for them. And they get to be with like-minded children who have parents who are veterans or have experienced the things that are significant or just a part of what it is to be a service member. My son jumped all around. He lived in Indianapolis. He lived in Germany. He lived in Texas. He lived in California. He is someone who didn't have that ability to kind of grow up with his friends and be with his friends all the way through. And so there's a lot of veterans who have children who have that same kind of upbringing. And I think that, those are the things. So I guess, that's kind of the epiphany of things is that it's not just about the veteran, it's about the family as well. That the family dynamics, and my wife, she goes to these events and she's with me and she's just someone who's very supportive, but right now she's a full-time employee herself. And so she can't be as proactive, but what she can do, she does. And I think that that's what we understand as well. Maybe you can't be there all the time, but maybe you can just come and we can provide you with information that maybe we're pushing for a legislative initiative. Do you know that we had one of our spokesperson in Sacramento just this week speaking in regards to a higher tax incentive for disabled veterans, and that would reflect on everybody, you know? And so it's, there's a lot of legislative work that happens and starts, just at a chapter level where a discovery is that something and this is where it just blew my mind. And I'll have to tell you about this experience that, when I first became a national service officer, a young boy from Fresno, and here I am watching Ted Kennedy introduce our national commander. I'm in the halls of Congress, sitting in this historic room and listening to the testimony before Congress, the Joint Committee on Veterans Affairs, and going from door to door and talking about how these resolutions or these initiatives or bills it just blew my mind how effective it could be. And so these things that can just start in someone's community can be influential, not only in their community, but in the entire United States from now and in the future. So a person has that ability. And if you just kind of grasp that, how many times have you been somewhere or have experienced something as a veteran and you ask yourself, why is this happening? This shouldn't be happening. And how can we change this? Well, how we change it is through that process. And you were there in Reno when we put it before our various committees and we made it a state legislative platform, and we took it to the national organization, and the national organization's committee reviewed it, and lo and behold, it becomes part of our national agenda. And you're going door to door, in Washington, D.C., and I never saw that in my future whatsoever. I've testified before joint committees on the capital assets for realignment for enhanced services. I was telling them how that's ridiculous to think that, Vandenberg Air Force Base people can drive to Los Angeles for their care. When you look at miles versus time, even for Long Beach and Los Angeles. So to be able to to be a voice for these different things. And you can. It'll take you out of your shell. It literally will.
Yeah.
It'll motivate you to be a part of something that's greater than yourself.
Yeah.
And so
Legacy.
those are the things that I think that people can understand. And not everybody's going to be that way.
Yeah.
Again, you might be someone who's just really good at making tri-tip barbecue, and we want you, to feed us. Then bring it,
Yeah,
But no,
1,000%,
there's just different things that people can do,
Well, Dan, CEO Adjutant of the California Department of the DAV. I mean, I'm blessed. You said something earlier that I also resonate with, and it feels like that I've been given a lot of my life. And I mean, people from the outside in will absolutely call me crazy because I do put in a lot of work into what I do, but it's been a ride and it's been fun, and you've been a huge part of where I am today. I did not, believe me, I got out in 2010, and I believe you and I met in 2016, and I didn't see myself as a veteran advocate at all. I fell into the role, and I fell into the DAV. I literally went to the VA. I saw the line was long, and I kept walking in the hallway, and I just peeked my head and I said, "What is this?" And that was how my relationship with the DAV blossomed. And I'm honored, and I thank you for your time, and I thank you for everything you've done for me, and I thank you for keeping me in mind, and I thank you for giving me the flexibility to continue to try to get things, started in the college system. And I mean, thank you for your trust, and thank you for what you do for the veterans, because I was one of those veterans that didn't know about what was going on behind the scenes. And you guys, all the VSOs, for the most part, do some very phenomenal things for us. And we all should be very thankful and appreciative. And for those listening, bring a friend. If you're part of the DAV, take a friend to an event. And if you're not part of the DAV, find an event and take a friend to the event. It really is important for us as veterans to continue to grow the community, because it takes a village. And that's what you're getting at, Dan. It takes
absolutely.
a village. It takes, our wives and the time that we're away from the families, and they have to pick up the slack. It takes the village of the veteran mailman and the first responders that get out and continue service in that aspect. It takes, if you walk around your community, I guarantee you will be surprised to find how many people have served that you didn't know. So again, Dan, thank you for introducing me to so many wonderful people and bringing me into your world. And thank you for coming on to the show and giving a piece of your backstory and the lessons learned and some of that, generational goodness.
One of the things I think that you have always provided, and even facilitating this, this avenue for getting information out, and it was something that was taught to me, and it's how I carry my vision in how I move forward with this organization, is that you keep us informed, you inspire us to do more, but along the way, we experience the camaraderie, we experience the happiness, we experience your journey, and it's entertaining, and it's something that I think is it's part of your success, and it's what makes you and this program something that will keep your listeners just in tuned and alert and want to hear what's next in the journey.
My eyes are sweating.
Your allergies are kicking in.
Well, is there anything that you wanted to touch on before we get out, or some last words of advice or encouragement for those getting out?
Yeah, I would say that a good story that I want to finish this with is that at the height of the Iraq-Afghanistan conflict, there were several groups that were developing, and I'm talking about nonprofit organizations who had, just polished, iconic leadership that was really sought after to be the spokesperson for that generation. And there was actually an initiative, the Dole Shalala initiative, to have the Code of Federal Regulations modified to just that generation of veterans post 9/11. And the core reason I bring this up is because what we brought to the attention of these new organizations is that they're not always going to be the new kids on the block. That when we are looking at supporting veterans, we're not talking about a specific generation. We're talking about veterans in a global sense.
Yeah.
And when we align ourselves, we do a consortium for the independent budget review with 5 other service organizations, or a total of 5 organizations. We partner with a lot of other organizations in a strengthened numbers approach. But more importantly, it's that we want it to be that we are all brothers from a choice that we made. And some didn't make that choice, but a lot of us did make the choice. And America is very supportive of us now.
Yeah.
They haven't always been, but they are now. And so luckily that group heard the message, and they understood that aligning with the DAV, aligning with other organizations in a one unified approach, the regulation was changed, but it reflected all veterans, not just post 9/11. See, it still affected 9/11 veterans, but it also helped to support the resources and the care and benefits for all generations of veterans.
Yeah.
So I think that's what the takeaway we have to understand is open yourself up to all veterans. Open yourself up to hear their stories. And I'll tell you, I'm, not a post 9/11 veteran, but I'm enriched with having experienced just a relationship with World War II veterans, Korean War veterans, with Vietnam veterans, with even the veterans who were not in a wartime period. And of course, the post 9/11 veteran. I can't relate to some of the things that you went through, but I certainly have an open mind and an open ear, and will listen and will do whatever I can to make sure that you're taken care of. And that's what our organization has really built itself and its success on.
Yeah. And that is a good note to go off on. So, thank you for tuning in to You're the Vet. Thank you so much again, Mr. Dan Contreras. I can't tell you how blessed I am for this opportunity. And for you listening, please absolutely find your nearest DAV service officer, whether it's at the VA, maybe at the federal building. If there's just a chapter in your neighborhood, definitely reach out. What I want to say for the very last thing is, don't just see what they can do for you. If they help you out, please see what you can do for them, and give back to the rest of your family. So that's the last message. So thank you for listening to You're the Vet. Please tune back in for the next episode. Please share it with your friends and your family and the individuals getting out. And you are heroes, so live like one.